It is October 6th, 2025. And if there's anything that the US and Israel have made clear, it's that they are going to continue to pursue more endless war and more genocide. And yes, I say that even as Trump is now presenting this so called peace proposal for the Palestinians, claiming that it is going to lead to a ceasefire, to the release of hostages from both sides, and that it's somehow going to solve everything. But we, of course, know that it's not really going to solve anything. It doesn't do anything for the Palestinian people. And it raises the concerns, in fact, that the US and Israel are doing this in order to further plan their next attack on Iran, that they are allowing for momentary quote unquote peace in Gaza so that they can focus more on the plans that they have for the next phase of war against Iran. So, where do tensions stand all around, and what should we be concerned about as we go into the coming weeks? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier. So, let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Seyed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Rachel.
Great to have you on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here. I know that we are at the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks and the death and destruction that Israel and the US and their Western allies have waged across the region in the last 2 years of this live stream genocide has been horrific and widespread. Now we have President Trump claiming that he's suddenly ready for peace, even though his plan for Gaza would further extend Israeli control. So, how do you view the current state that we're in right now?
The situation obviously is going downhill for the United States, the collective West, for the Israeli regime, of course, in particular. The world has turned against the regime and its backers. Even in the West, in the United States, people have turned against Zionism and they're outraged at the genocide, despite the propaganda, despite the fact that the mainstream media is captured, despite the fact that Zionist control over TikTok is now assured. But still, it's not working. And I think that Trump recognizes that. He recognizes that his stature, the stature of the regime and the collective West, although the collective West may not be that important for him, but the stature of the empire is crumbling, and so I think he does need to be seen as attempting to bring about a ceasefire. Of course, the peace proposal is basically a proposal for capitulation and humiliation and permanent captivity for those Palestinians who will be allowed to remain on their own homeland. That is the plan. The response of Hamas and its allies, because its allies were part of this negotiation process, is very well crafted. It is designed to keep the ball rolling, to prevent the United States from making false accusations about Hamas being against a ceasefire, which is, we all know now, is a lie. But I think that many are skeptical that this will lead to any long-term halt in hostilities. Over the last 24 hours, the Israeli regime continues to slaughter children in particular. Lots of children have been killed in recent hours in Gaza. And of course, they've been bombing Lebanon, as we've heard, and murdering a husband and wife who were going to pick up their children at school. This is the sort of peace that the Israeli regime wants. It wants perpetual war and massacre and slaughter. And I think what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to enhance his own image. And also maybe he thinks that he could try at intimidating the resistance so that maybe they will capitulate. I don't see that happening. And I think it's mostly an attempt to improve his image. And I don't think that's going to work either, because people are just sick and tired of the mass slaughter, and they see through all this propaganda. They see how the Israelis are hiring people to paying them $7,000 a clip. It's so bad, and they're making it worse because they're also in the United States making it clear to ordinary Americans that the Israelis and that Zionism dictates terms in local politics, in the lifestyle of ordinary Americans. It's not just about taking American money and carrying out genocide, but it's also about limiting freedom of expression, the freedom to protest in the United States, not about their own government, but about some foreign entity that's carrying out a Holocaust. So the situation is just going to get worse. Now, it is also believed by some that Trump would like to have a lull in the hostility so that the Israelis could have a freer hand in carrying out a new war against Iran. That is a possibility. We'll have to wait and see. We don't know, but it is clear that the American and Israeli regimes are working together to prepare the regime for another war. And that is quite extraordinary if one takes into account the fact that the United States claims that it has, as Trump repeatedly says, obliterated Iran's peaceful nuclear program, which of course was an act of war and barbaric and inhumane, that aside, but they don't have an excuse based on Trump's own claims to attack Iran again, but they seem to be preparing for that. And that shows that this was never about Iran's peaceful nuclear program, because we know that since 1996, I think, Netanyahu has been saying Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon. Sometimes he'd say it's a couple of years away. Sometimes he'd say it's a few months away. Sometimes he'd say it's a few weeks away. But for almost 30 years now, 29 years, he's been saying that Iran is on the verge of building a nuclear weapon. But all that aside, that's gone. Now Trump has claimed that there is no nuclear program. So why are they planning to attack? It's obvious. This has always been about Palestine. This has always been about the fact that Iran is the only country that has been supporting the Palestinian people and the resistance for the last 50 years. That's what all the antagonism against Iran has been about, the sanctions, the accusations about human rights, about women's rights, about children's rights, freedom, and so on. The United States supports absolute monarchies, but Iran, which has election after election, it is constantly attacked. This all has to do with Palestine, Iran's sovereignty, and Palestine.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important to keep in mind. And especially as you're pointing out Trump's own statements, right? Because I remember in the aftermath of those attacks when he was coming out so boldly saying, hey, we destroyed this, we destroyed that. Iran's nuclear program is no longer an issue. I'm sitting there and going, okay, but the US establishment is going to have to find a way to make something an issue because they are not done waging war against Iran. It doesn't matter if it's logical, it doesn't matter. What matters is that push for control, that push for influence. And as you're noting there, Iran has continued to stand strong. The Iranian people came together in the face of these attacks. So what are your concerns moving forward about what the US and Israel could be planning, even if it's not, obviously they can't do the same operation again. They've wasted a lot of those opportunities that they had been planning for years, and now they're moving on to the next thing. What is your concern about what that next thing could be?
Well, I think whatever it is, it's going to be very deadly. And since they failed last time, despite it being a blitzkrieg attack and an unexpected attack to take down the state, but this time around, the Iranians are not going to be caught off guard so easily. The Iranians knew there would be an attack. They just didn't think the regime would go after the leadership. This is not something that's done in today's world. But of course, that was a major miscalculation on behalf of the Iranians. The Israeli regime has no red lines. When they target women and children and slaughter them every day, and the media is has been justifying it for 2 years. There are no red lines for this regime. So that was a major miscalculation. But I think next time around it's going to be more difficult for the regime because the Iranians have restructured their military. They've seen their own weaknesses. They're working to deal with those weaknesses, to improve their strengths. After all, the Israeli regime used the best technology that is available to them. They used all of their capabilities. So the Iranians learned a great deal about the regime's offensive and defensive capabilities. But Iran is alone. At the end of the day, Turkey is with NATO. The regimes in the Persian Gulf are in the American camp. Turkey has been helping the Israeli regime. We saw that in Syria. We see how they're transporting oil to Netanyahu from the Republic of Azerbaijan. The regime in Azerbaijan is an ally of Netanyahu. The Kurdish areas of Iraq are dominated by the United States. They have huge influence there. So it is Iran basically against the collective West and its regional proxies, Erdogan, the dictators in the Persian Gulf, and so on. But Iran has been, during the previous war, the 12-day war, the Iranians did come out on top. We recall how Steve Bannon, who knows what he's talking about when he speaks about U.S. politics and the military, he said that during the last 3-4 days of the war, the Israelis were taking a huge battering, and that it was Trump that saved Netanyahu and the Israeli regime because the Iranians were hammering them. So I think that next time round it will be worse for the regime. Why, though, will they probably carry out another war? Because Netanyahu needs war, because he needs constant crises. He needs crises and he needs constant crisis so that he can retain power. At the end of the day, Netanyahu is fighting for his own survival. He's not fighting for the regime so much as he's fighting for Netanyahu. And so what he does does not serve the interests of the Israeli regime. It's become delegitimized in the eyes of the world. The world sees Zionism as illegitimate, immoral. They see the regime as genocidal. They see it like they would see the Nazis and other such evil regimes. This is not in the interests of the Israeli regime, but Netanyahu needed all of the war on Lebanon, the genocide in Gaza, the war on Yemen, the war on Iran, the regime change in Syria. All of these have been carried out in order to preserve his premiership so that he doesn't go to court and subsequently doesn't go to jail.
Yeah, and as Netanyahu is saving himself, the U.S. is in this position because I think that's another question that they look at the U.S. and they go, okay, I understand why Netanyahu needs the constant chaos and the constant war and why he is all pro-genocide because he knows that all of the, right-wing maniacs in his government are going to get on board with that. But then they look at the U.S. and they go, okay, what's in it for the U.S.? Because right now the rest of the world, they know that the United States is complicit in this genocide. They know that every bullet that kills every child in Gaza, that the U.S. has a hand in that and is fully allowing that. And it's the U.S. in this position where they're looking and they go, oh, we get to get out Syria, we get to target Iran. Oh, we're targeting all of these key pillars of the multipolar world. We're hurting the friends of Russia and China, or at least attempting to. So when you see kind of the bigger picture, and especially this goes back to the ongoing genocide and the way that the world looks at it, how have the last 2 years alone, do you think, impacted the way that the world looks at the U.S. and really the danger of continued U.S. dominance?
Well, if you look at how the recent Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit played out, I think you can tell that the rest of the world is just sick and tired of Washington, Trump, and of course the Israeli regime and the Europeans. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization before was basically a security organization. But during this summit, it suddenly turned increasingly like BRICS. In other words, it was becoming a comprehensive organization that dealt with economic integration, cultural cooperation, political cooperation, and it became a platform so that countries could move closer to each other, countries across Asia could move closer to each other at all levels. And this was a direct result of the behavior of the United States, trying to corner countries across the world, whether through dirty wars or sanctions or the threat of war or tariffs. We see that the United States is now even targeting India and Brazil. So the West has left nothing for themselves. And the United States and Trump have been acting as a catalyst for other countries to move closer to each other. So the United States has pushed Iran and Russia closer to each other very rapidly. The two countries their relationship was evolving. The Americans made it move fast forward. The same is true between Russia and China, Iran and China, and so on. And so, right now India's rethinking its relationship with China and Iran. This is due to the United States. So by weaponizing the dollar, by using tariffs as a weapon, by carrying out a Holocaust, by engaging in multiple wars, such as in Ukraine, and failing to end these wars, the United States has made the rest of the world come to the conclusion that they need to gather together to protect themselves. And therefore, the evolution, the movement towards the multipolar world has progressed much more rapidly than before. Ironically, Trump has been threatening countries not to move towards BRICS, and of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is now becoming sort of like the Asian version of BRICS, and Asian is the heart of the global economy now. He was threatening countries. Now we see that the movement towards what Trump was fearful of has quickened. That's his doing.
It's a reminder to all of those countries that it's almost like what Trump warns them against. They go, okay, we need to head in that direction. Now, even as we do see the progression of the multipolar world, right, we see all of these countries working together, it still kind of brings us back to that position of looking at Iran and looking at Palestine and looking at the ways in which they are forced to kind of fend for themselves to a certain extent, and the ways in which the US and Israel are going to continue to target and to attack them. And I know that for the Palestinians in particular, I mean, Trump has made it very clear what he plans, right? He has no problem pushing for the complete extermination of the Palestinian people and trying to wipe them off their land, even as we continue to see the public sentiment of people going, why are we involved in this? What are your concerns moving forward, especially as we, hit that 2-year mark of when this genocide was really accelerated, and when we look at what the US is willing to allow Israel to do and willing to do themselves to further try to silence the Palestinian people?
Well, Rachel, you live in the United States. I think the United States no longer has red lines, or at least in many regards, it doesn't. Even at home, we see the U.S. military being used against the will of the different states that have governors that are not aligned to Trump. We see that freedom of speech and freedom of assembly is rapidly decreasing in the United States. We see how the United States is bombing boats in the Caribbean, and now fishermen are fearful of going to the sea, and that's obviously going to put pressure on people in different countries. It's going to drive up the price of food. But the United States doesn't care, and probably it will start bombing Venezuela using all sorts of different lies. And the media will support them. Even the media that traditionally opposes Trump, they will justify aggression, because that's how it works. When the Israeli regime carried out its unprovoked attack and war against Iran. We saw the liberal media supporting the war. CNN was talking about sleeper cells in the United States. In other words, it was pointing fingers at Iranian Americans, American citizens. Many who had been born in the United States had never seen Iran, but they were trying to create fear among Americans in order to create support for the Israeli regime. So the same woke people who speak about different genders and different ethnic backgrounds when it comes to Israel, they are quite willing to target Iranian Americans who are not even political. Who are, most of them, many of them, as I said, don't even speak Persian. They've never been to Iran, but they're more than willing to do so to help the military to help the military attack, the Zionist military attack against Iran. The same is true with Venezuela. And then, of course, we see how the Israeli regime can bomb boats in the Mediterranean. They can then kidnap hundreds of activists in international waters. They were still in international waters. And even if they had entered the Gazan waters, the Israeli regime would still have no right to touch them. Because according to the UN Security Council resolutions, Gaza and the West Bank are illegally occupied. But the West will do nothing about it. Western media will show no reaction or response. The BBC, the VOA, CNN, Sky News, The Guardian, the New York Times, the Breitbart. It doesn't matter if it's to the so-called left or the liberals or the right. They're all captured, and they're all the same. They may be a bit different in the degree to which they're bombastic in language when using language, but they are essentially the same when it comes to policy. So the United States has the masks are off now. There are no masks. The era of using human rights and freedom to slaughter people and to invade and destroy countries is gone. I don't even think we can say we've gone back to the early 20th century or the 19th century, where it was the civilizing mission, when they were slaughtering in order to civilize us. I think now it's just brute force. They've gone back to the medieval times, and they just go and slaughter for the sake of power. That's what the West is now. When we recall, when the Israeli regime wants to attack Iran, suddenly the Western-controlled International Atomic Energy Agency lied about Iran to justify the war. And then when the regime attacked Iran, the European Union supported it. The German chancellor said the Israelis are doing our dirty work. When the UN Security Council convened, Western European countries were condemning Iran for the Israeli attack. And they were saying that the Israeli regime has the right to defend itself and that the Iranians should not escalate tensions. This is what it is now. All pretenses, all the facade of civilization, that's all gone now.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how it almost feels like the US and Israel are in this position of like, yeah, we're committing genocide. Yeah, we are bombing sovereign nations because we feel like it. What are you going to do about it? It's as if they want the world to see it as if they feel unstoppable. Now, the last thing I wanted to bring up here is, of course, the position that Iran is in, because we've seen from Iran, they've made it very clear that, look, every time we retaliate, we will continue to escalate each time. They're not coming out in the first retaliation and giving you everything that they have and all of their modern weapons and blowing Israel off the map. No, they are taking it incrementally and responding in a measured way each time, continuing to escalate. And they keep putting out these warnings that, hey, you don't want to attack us, we are going to respond. So how do you view the position Iran is in, kind of what it is preparing for? Because it almost seems like the attack, whatever that may be coming from the US and Israel, it's not even an if, but a when at this point.
Rachel, and you're in media, you know media better than I. But for almost 5 decades, the collective West has been demonizing Iran. And they supported the Shah, they supported Saddam Hussein in his invasion of Iran. They gave him chemical weapons to use. They've been strangling the Iranian economy, supporting terrorists, trying to bring about color revolutions. They've done whatever they could to undermine Iran. And as I said, it's all about Iran's sovereignty, independence after the revolution, and Iran's support for the Palestinian people and other liberation movements across the world. They cannot tolerate Iran. But this demonization that has worked so well for 5 decades, I mean, there's no denying that this narrative has influenced views on Iran across the world. But that's fallen apart during the last 2 years. First, they destroyed their own image. Gradually, Iran's image was enhanced across the world because people began to see that this same evil Iran, this supposedly evil Iran, is the only country alongside Yemen that is supporting the Palestinian people, that is paying a price. I mean, some are giving lip service, but it's just fake. I mean, Qatar or Turkey under Erdogan, their support is fake. I mean, Erdogan helps the United States in our region. He helps the Israeli regime. He does trade. He does business. He has a embassy there. So he's been exposed. Qatar, the air base, or CENTCOM base in Qatar, has been used to attack Iran in working against Iran. It's been used against Yemen. It's been used against Syria. The same is true with all the other regimes aligned to the United States. Their bases, American bases in all these countries, are being used against Iran. So Iran is now seen by everyone as the only country that has the moral authority. They are the ones who are defending the Palestinian people who are being exterminated. They're the ones paying the price. They in Yemen, and of course the rest are resistance groups. But it is the key country in this alliance, this axis of resistance, that is paying a price, that has moral clarity, and whereas other countries are supporting the genocide. So people no longer believe that Iran is the evil country that the West has been saying for the last 50 years, because why is it that only this evil country is opposing genocide? Why is it that no other country in this region is sanctioned? Why is it that no other country in this region is regime in this region is being antagonized? Only the state of Iran, only the Islamic Republic of Iran is being antagonized. So people are waking up to that. People, not just in our region, but beyond. People in Latin America, people in North America, people I'm not saying the majority, let's say in the United States, are suddenly supportive of Iran, but you do see strong elements of change within certain communities. People now see the reality of the dirty war in Syria and why the Iranians were opposed to this CIA operation, and why the Iranians were saying that those regimes in the region that were carrying it out and using sectarianism to basically carry out a CIA operation that was done at the behest of the Zionist movement. People are seeing all that now. So the world has changed. And while we are heading towards probable confrontation, I think that while it will be painful for the region and the world, but Iran will come out on top. And Iran's clout across the region and across the world will be further enhanced. And the United States and its allies will be despised even further. Trump, who pretended to be the peace president, is carrying out war after war and supporting genocide. I was saying the other day to someone that Trump wants another war to be launched by the Zionist regime against Iran, so that he could say that when it ends, he can say he carried out another peace initiative. So he can wage wars and then pretend that the ceasefire is due to his hard work. And I hope he does actually get the Nobel Peace Prize, because the Nobel Peace Prize has always been a fake prize. And I would like to see this this prize to be finally exposed to even the most naive people across the world for the worthless prize that it's been. For years, they have been giving it to war criminals, Israeli prime ministers, and they've been giving it to people in order to enhance and strengthen the empire. And I think Europe no longer has any credibility. But I think if the Peace Prize is given to Trump, it will mean the final death of the Nobel Peace Prize, and it will, I think, wake up those last few people who are still asleep and unwilling to open their eyes to reality.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. If the people have forgotten about Barack Obama winning the Nobel Peace Prize and then going on to illegally bomb 7 countries, maybe now they need Donald Trump, who's in the midst of bombing all of these countries and carrying out proxy wars, to see him get it, to then finally realize, okay, maybe this doesn't have much merit to it. And I'm with you. I mean, decades of propaganda, all now being shattered by the position that Iran continuing to stand for the Palestinian people. And then when the public starts to wake up and realize, wait a second, what is the West supporting? That is the question that everyone needs to be asking. And I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down and to educate us on all of the latest here. Seyed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.